Minutes of Climb Strong Live. We've got some questions queued up. We've got Steve back. I think it's Alex's turn to do. I think he's doing some crunches right now. We told everyone that you were doing burpees last time.
Yeah, I just don't. I don't have enough good stuff to. I don't have enough good material to be on every week.
Then why the heck am I on here?
Yeah. So let's get to questions. I had a couple of them come through, and the first one that I wanted to address, because we don't usually field nutrition questions because we don't know anything about it. Not the first thing. No, what's interesting is that a lot of my job and Charlie's job is to help people through the entire journey of fitness, and that includes everything from lifestyle design to habit change to general fitness recommendations and nutritional strategies. And what was interesting when I first graduated from college, or maybe I hadn't even graduated yet, but my mom's like, well, yeah, write a diet for me. I'd love to lose a little bit of weight. And so I gave her like straight down like nutrient ratios. You should be eating this, 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 and this. I gave her a really detailed diet. And of course, she failed miserably because there were too many changes. It was too much specific recommendation and not enough education involved. And I was going, you need to eat 100 calories of chicken at this meal and this and that. And what ended up happening was she would look at it and be like, well, okay, I don't know how much is in 100 calories of chicken. I don't have broccoli in the refrigerator, and there became all these roadblocks. The feedback then is that she's failing to do the diet, and therefore she might as well not do it at all. And so when people are asking, the question that I had was, I'm a 180-pound male. Exactly how many calories should I be taking for weight loss, and how much of that should be protein, right? And so that's a very, very specific question that probably, even if I could answer it specifically for that athlete, it would probably be the wrong answer. And so one of the things that's very, very important is to think about on a scale of your entire life, what are your habits that are leading you toward your goal, or the habits that are leading you away from your goal? And a really simple thing for good sports nutrition is to think about your basic macronutrient ratios at each of your meals. And so what we want to do when we're building our food habit is to think of a palm-sized portion. Whoops, there we go. Palm-sized portion of protein. So something about the size of your palm. You don't need to measure it. And that can be lean, usually lean meats rather than like fatty meats, pork and things like that. If you're doing vegetables, it should be a fist-sized portion. If you're using carbohydrates or grains, it should be something that'll fit in a cupped hand. And then your fat should be a portion the size of your thumb. And these are really good ideas because you can then lay them out on a plate and go, okay, I'm pretty good here. If you end up with a ton of pasta and a very small amount of protein, you may not be optimizing your recovery and your sports nutrition there. The cool thing about eating with these kind of basic ratios is the same things that help us perform athletically are the things that help us to lose weight. And we just have to worry about one basic thing, and that's not eating until you're absolutely full. If you're really on a strength building and training hard phase, yeah, eat a ton, don't worry about it. But if you're trying to lose weight, just stop before you're completely full. And that's like just a habit of like, I'm gonna eat a little bit less at each meal. It takes a little bit of discipline to begin with, but then the habit becomes very, very clear. And if you can keep it simple, it's much, much easier than trying to track calories and exact grams and all those sorts of things. And so keep thinking, how can I simplify this? Where am I weakest? What are the things that are my worst habits? And just a last little thing here, the thing I love, and this was something I learned from James Clear, was that bad habits tend to pay off in the short term, and good habits will tend to pay off in the long term. And so if you're thinking about 3 beers tonight, might not seem that bad an idea tonight, but tomorrow you'd be like, damn, I should have only had one. And vice versa, eating just a salad and a lean protein for dinner might kind of suck right now, but tomorrow and next week and the next month, you're going to be proud of that. And so think about in terms of your better habits versus your worse habits.
Yeah, and I think, Steve's talking about these big meals, right? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. But I also think too, and what he's getting at here with the beers is like all that little in between time. What do you grab when you need a quick snack because you're maybe feeling a little low on energy? Is it like the bag of Doritos, or is it a handful of almonds? Are you drinking lots of soda during the day? What's your water intake like, right? Like if you drink a lot of water, you aren't going to want to have 3 beers because you're already full from that liquid. So it's always funny little tricks to kind of keep away from those empty calories, especially the alcohol or the sleeve of Oreos mindlessly as you're, especially in self-isolation, because it's just that bored eating. So picking apart where you're kind of having empty or not so necessary calories is also smart money as well. And of course, the stuff that's on the plate for those big meals as well. We had a question from Casca, I believe, on Instagram, and this is a really good question. If we think about it, it makes sense, and we've got some tools to make it feel a little bit easier, or so you can progress it. So she asked, thanks for doing these. What can we work on to be able to campus 4-7 in the 1-4-7, the classic kind of campus protocol? 1-4 feels easy, but can only get to 4.5 on the pull through, right? And so, I've been doing this for years, or it's been like that for years. What's up with that? Why can't I do it? Right? Very simply put, going from 1-4 on the campus board's easy because you're doing a pull up, right? You're using two arms or two limbs to get you there. And then essentially you're doing a one arm to get through to the 7. Okay. And so my first question to Casca would be, what size rungs is she doing it on, right? Is it the small one or is it the large one? And she even said, it sounds like her campus board has the half rung. So she's even just going up half a rung instead of to the next number. She might not be able to do it because the ladder that she's going through on, this hold is small. She can't generate the force or the power to get to it. And she's only slapping the 5.5. So I would say she might need to move to a bigger rung. And most campus boards now do have those half rungs, but also have those extra large and extra large rungs. And she might be able to gain or get the adaptation to be able to do 1-4-7 with a bigger hold, right? Like if you can imagine, if the hold's too small and she can't do it, she's never going to get there if she keeps practicing on it. So think about the hold size. And then I think she needs to then think about when she can do 1-4-7 on a specific hold size, then she can start moving down to a smaller rung and start using those half rungs as well. If you're someone who can't do the 1-4-7 on the big rungs, try 1-3-6 or 1-3-5 even. Make the distance a little bit less, and then you can build progression in your program by going into 1-4-7. Like eventually some guys and gals can go 1-5-9. That's like incredible, right? But we can't start there and keep missing and wonder why we can't get there. So think about a little bit smaller rung size, and then think about maybe making the pull through a little bit less so you're not doing a one arm for as long. Anything to add there, Steve?
What I was going to say is you can also break it down even further, like come off the campus board and work on your single arm pulls, like pulls on a cable machine or single arm lock offs on a pull up bar, and working on like even a towel pull up where one hand is held on a towel, pressing the body through, pulling down through there. And a lot of people just don't have that kind of strength, because it's a tremendous amount of strength to be able to dynamically move through a single arm pull. And as that lower hand on 1-4-7 comes down past the ribs, we start to get pretty weak there on the triceps and the explosiveness that comes out of it. And so there's some value to pressing through with the cable. And there's a great exercise if you do have a cable machine that's called a cable pull through or a one arm pull, and taking a light weight and pulling down with the cable and then pressing it into all the way down until full extension below your waist, like you would do on a dip or like a muscle up. but getting used to moving between the muscle groups. So going from the lat to the triceps and shoulder. There's a lot of people, especially short climbers, that are trying to do like a tall person sequence, or they always feel like reach is an issue. Learning to be able to press just a little bit lower. Those cable exercises can be really good for that. And it's a lot safer. The dynamic nature of the campus board can be kind of crushing. So.
And I was gonna say too, like Steve was saying, like where people are limited by the finger strength, and so actually doing something like a cable pull through, you're just working muscles to make them stronger, and then you can start working on the finger strength.
Yeah. So there's a question from Brian, and this was talking about we have a pretty solid grasp on strength standards. Like we would say, you should be able to deadlift a couple times your body weight. You should be able to do X number of pull-ups. You should be able to bench press your body weight. There's some basic standards we'd like to see out of strength training, and this is strangely enough, we get some kickback on this from people that say, oh, like why would a climber need to be able to do that? Well, it's not necessarily climbers. It's just a functional athletic human being that needs to be able to deadlift twice their body weight. But this is a very, very low level of strength, because like if we look at deadlift world records over 1,000 pounds, and so if I'm asking you to deadlift twice your body weight, for Charlie that's like 300 pounds. So that's 30% of the world record. It's not a really high number. And so we want to have that basic level of strength in order to prevent injury and keep all of our muscles functioning at close to optimal levels, so that we can then train specifically. Okay, so then Brian asks, beyond the strength standards, what endurance standards do we have? And what are some specifics that I can look for there? Now, this is a really difficult thing to put forth, because it's much harder to measure the endurance of an athlete, because what we run into with climbing is the only true endurance component in rock climbing or bouldering is forearm endurance. We don't run into limiting cardiorespiratory endurance. We don't run into muscular endurance in the pecs or the abs. I suppose like at Devil's Tower, you might run into a muscular endurance limit in your calves, but really it's very, very localized muscular endurance. And so then when it comes time to test that, it becomes really, really difficult to come up with standards. And some of the testing companies have come up with decent standards. Probably the best are the lattice tests. But what I would say is to get a baseline for your local forearm muscular endurance, and then look to try to continually improve that. Don't worry about standards that other people might have. You go based on what you're at right now. And so you've got two tests that are pretty easy for most people to implement. Number one, the first test would be a hangboard 10-second on, 10-second off test. And so you're going to go 10-second hang, rest for 10 seconds. 10-second hang, rest for 10 seconds. Pretty decent size edge is going to be fine for that, like a 20 millimeter. And then just count the number of rounds you get. And that'll give you a really good indication of your local forearm muscular endurance. You can also do laddering if you have a foot rail for your campus board. You ladder up and down on the campus board with your feet on the rail, and just count the number of times your hands touch holds. Don't worry about making big moves or whatever. It's really just the forearm muscular endurance. Take note of those two numbers maybe. You can do those both in the same testing session, and then look to improve those over time. But we don't have a really good set of standards on that yet. Some of the things like the 10 deck has a test for that. Exergio, Tyler Nelson's been working on some testing with that. But these are very, very simple ones to implement. Really easy to tell how you're feeling in your endurance. And so those are the two places I would start with that.
Thanks for that question, Brian. I got to say hi to my mom. Hello. Hello from New Hampshire.
Hi, darling.
Mike's on here. Alex put in a question. Hi, Alex. Get back to those. Get back to that hangboard. Wyatt asked, okay, I have been fingerboard training for years now and know by now how to avoid injury on grips involving 3 to 4 fingers. but it always seemed even the lightest load, 5 to 10 pounds hung from webbing. So like, holding it almost like in a pinch block style on two and especially single finger produces a nervy, tingly feeling in the anterior flexors, not necessarily pain, but weirdness nonetheless. Is it wise to back off even further here to just a few pounds and progress very, very slowly, or forget it altogether? Or any other suggestions? First, I would say training your fingers feels nervy and painful regardless. It's just painful. But any sort of sensation like that, I'd want to make sure, do you have an injury? Do you have a history of an injury in those fingers? And have you been cleared by someone, maybe your PT or someone who is a climber and then understands the anatomy of the hands and how that works? But if you're training individual fingers, it doesn't take much to stress that tendon the way it needs to be stressed to see some sort of adaptation. So I don't know if 5 or 10 pounds is too much or not for you, but it sounds like it might be. Just because you can crimp and like pull down like crazy like this on a edge, and you've got some numbers maybe with a tin deck or whatever, it doesn't translate like equally for each finger. So even if it's just a few pounds and you're just training it very, very little consistently and seeing that go up, then you're probably pretty good. If you continue to have pain and you're not seeing progress, there's probably something wrong. If you're truly taking your time and progressing the load appropriately and taking a very slow approach to finger stroke, because we know it takes a long, long time. It's not like you can just like cram your hangboard session in and try to overdo it to then see those results quicker. If you're truly progressing your load and you're still feeling pain, it's probably something you need to get checked out on. I wouldn't say you want to abandon it if you want to continue to be a strong climber, or especially if you want to climb in some sort of limestone scenario or wild iris where there's like small pockets where you're doing 1 or 2 or 3 fingers. It's something that you might just have to get looked at. But it sounds like you have tried this. It feels a little funky. I would back off maybe a little bit more weight and then, try it once a week or twice a week for a little while and see if you can start to add on that. But it's super duper slow. It's slower than you want it to be. And I think that's probably what you're running into.
We had a good question from John. John from West Virginia writing in, and he's trying to incorporate speed and power training into his weight training sessions, and he's doing a good job of putting those things in after the warm up or at the end of the specific warm up, and then trying to incorporate those before he maybe goes into the main lifts of his workout. And this is a weight training specific question. But he asked, what are some exercises for developing leg power, pushing power, and pulling power? And one of the things to keep in mind when we're talking about power, it's strength with a speed component, right? And so if you are implementing any amount of speed into something, it becomes a power exercise. And what we need to think about is even like throwing a baseball is power. All the way up to like catching a clean and jerk. And so when we start to implement them, especially at the end of a workout, I would do body weight, power, explosive exercises. And so vertical jumps or jumps and then a knee tuck are really great for lower body power. You can also do box jumps, which are actually a little less damaging on your joints than jumping just up and landing on the floor. But some box jumps, some explosive stuff there. And again, man, you start moving your entire body weight. That's getting to be a pretty high load. So box jumps, awesome. After a couple of sets of box jumps, you can start doing single leg box jumps. And that is a tremendous amount of power you're developing to move your body with one leg. And so that's sort of our start and finish for lower body power training for climbing. As far as pushing power goes, I like medicine ball work, like a chest pass, because you can just throw that medicine ball across the room, walk over and get it again, throw it across the room. We also really like what's called a power push-up. And the power push-up, you'll start at the bottom of what would normally be a push-up exercise. So you'll lay on the floor on your chest and have your hands hovering just above the floor, and then push as fast as you can and return to the floor. push as fast as you can, return to the floor, and probably somewhere in the realm of 5 to 7 reps of that, and you'll feel that velocity starting to slow. And that's when we've delivered the power stimulus, and then we can move on to other stuff. So the power push-up starts at the bottom, ends at the top. If you do normal push-ups and you haven't ever tried this, give it a shot next time you're doing a push-up workout. There's a completely different stimulus here, and a lot of people end up with a lot of soreness in their shoulders after just a few sets of these if they haven't been doing explosive push-ups. This is different than like a clapping push-up where you'd be dropping in from the bottom and then going back to the top, because we're taking out that reactive elastic component that we would normally have with a push-up from the top. Okay, so power push-up, box jump, and then the final thing with pulling power, I would do like a ball slam, like a medicine ball or a jam ball slam. So pick that thing up, throw it in the ground like you're trying to dig a hole with it. And that's a really high explosive movement, but it's also very low load. And we don't even like to go to super heavy medicine balls. I think the heaviest one we have our athletes train with is maybe 16, 18 pounds. But then really trying to develop force there. Once you've done a few sets of those, maybe an explosive pull-up, like where you go as fast as you can from the bottom to the top, and then either just step off onto a box or just lower down slowly. But those few things, all at body weight, are great ways of starting to develop speed and quickness. And then you can go into your normal lifts with lit up metabolism and also really lit up central nervous system. But those 3 things, box jumps, power push-ups, and ball slams, then maybe followed by a power pull-up, probably do the trick for you.
Let's see. I would say though about medicine balls, make sure it's one that doesn't bounce back at you. We have had athletes that have either changed gyms or we program it and we say it and they forget, and then boom, boom, and it's a trip to the hospital with a bruised face or broken glasses. So make sure that thing doesn't bounce back at you. Some of those have some bounciness to them. Marcy asked a really good question. Hi guys, thanks for doing this. Can you speak to tempo resistance training? I think I remember you stating that the isometric position is what climbers need to focus on. I would just do a little correction there. What's so cool about climbing is that all these types of training and quickness and not quickness or slow static movement is all facets of our training or all facets of our sport, right? Depends on the route, depends on the boulder, depends on the sport climber, depends on the rock type, depends on so many different things. What we would argue or what we would suggest is this tempo training actually can be more of the condition that we're in when we're thinking of less explosive moves, like delicate type moves where you have to latch the hold a certain way, where you're, when you think about doing a regular pull-up on a bar, you just go up and then down and it takes maybe even less than a second or maybe just about a second. When you're doing a climbing move and you're pulling through, it's way less or way more than a second, right? As you're delicately going out to some slabby move, or maybe it's some slope where you have to grab the exact way where you can't just snip or, snap to it. So doing these tempo type training resistance is a way to add into your program, or maybe you've never done it before. Maybe it's after a 6 or 8 week cycle of power training or just regular raw strength training. But what's really cool about tempo is it's actually pretty damn hard. We don't have to do it with a bunch of load, and it gets you to find that tension and work through that tension with a really slow rep. So, if you get a metronome timer or a metronome app on your phone and have it beep at you every few seconds, if you have a 3-second pull up and then a 3-second pull down, you're going to go from the person who can do 20 pull-ups to about 4 real quickly, right? And so we're just showing you that there's other ways to train this kind of strength in different conditions for different aspects of our sport, right? If it was just slow sloth climbing and that was the only climbing we did, that would be the training that would probably be most appropriate. But in the same route are the quickness and the fast latching of holds and the slow and the endurance and everything in between. So if you've never done tempo training, it's probably something that you should start featuring in there.
I'll add to that one of the things we found is with bouldering, people will tend to need more explosiveness. And then one of the things we see with trad climbing, and especially like placing gear and climbing delicate technical cracks, we need a lot more isometric strength. And so you could tailor your training that way and be like, oh yeah, I need to catch a finger lock and then hold it and lock off and then put this other one in. Because for sport climbing, usually I can just sort of jump and grab the pocket or edge or whatever. But the next finger lock might take some work to put in there. And so having that ability to lock off and hold these positions, trad climbing is much, much slower, much more body tension and core oriented. And so putting in a couple of exercises with slow tempo and that isometric hold can be really useful. So you could do like a 1 second concentric and then a 5 second hold and then a 1 second concentric down. But the really important thing is to find in your physicality where you're limited and what you're bad at. And you can do that with like a body weight squat. Go down, hold that bottom in for 5 seconds, and then just come back up out of it. And or even your the one that's really shows up for people is core stuff. Like do a straight leg raise, but then hold that straight position, your feet out in front of you for 1 second, and then come back down instead of just kicking up into it. And you'll start to see, wow, I'm not very strong there. The good news is the second you start asking your body to do those things, you'll start getting better at isometrics right away. I see isometrics improve quicker than any of the other facets of muscle movement. So hopefully that sort of answered that question.
Yeah. And I think the thing I want to say, or this wasn't really a question, but some stuff that's come up with just athletes and talking to people over the last few weeks. This is the kind of thing that the pandemic should provide for you, is a time to work on these things. You might not have access to your normal gym routine or the implements that you usually use. If you've never done tempo training, do it with the push-up and the pull-up and maybe the squat. Those are fine. You can do that at body weight or with a backpack loaded up with some water bottles or some books. You can do it with the push-up. You can incline your feet if you need to make it a little bit harder. You can do it with one arm. Most people can most climbers can find a door jam that they can latch their fingers on and do a slow pull-up. So this is the kind of training, or this is the kind of thing that we can come out of this self-isolation with some sort of movement forward or progression, even if it feels like minuscule. And we've been in this for 4 or 5 weeks now, and we might even be in it for another 4 or 5 more weeks. And if you've gone through this last 4 or 5 weeks with kind of just like, I did this program, I did that program, but really you haven't anchored yourself onto some improvement, or you haven't gotten slightly better at something, now's your time to like just put everything down, sit in front of the computer, sit in front of your training log, write out the next 4 weeks, have it be 1 or 2 focuses, maybe a hand like strength focus and 1 full body focus, and do it. Like the like, I'm going to wait to make my program 10 minutes before I do my hour workout never plays out. It's like 40 minutes of like deciding what you're going to do, and then 10 minutes of some like half-ass work, right? Write it out and then have the focus, and then you're good for the next 4 weeks. And for some people, this tempos training might be the way forward.
Okay, man. I think we're close on our time.
That's all we have, and that's the time. Yeah, keep sending your questions, everyone. We enjoy doing this, and thanks for tuning in.
All right.
Adios, y'all.
See you next week.